Today I'm going to be going through cleaning and rebuilding a carburetor on a Suzuki Quadrunner 250. This is going to cover a wide range of years, so I'm not going to be specific there, but somewhere in the late 90s, early 2000s, all those carburetors are going to be identical to this, so you can use this video for that process. I also, below, will put links to carb kits for this specific model, as well as links to my videos in regards to removing this carburetor. We've done a service on this machine. We've replaced U-joints, yokes, differentials, stuff like that. So I also want to put a link to those videos below. Make sure you check those out. If this video has been helpful, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and share with anyone that might find this video useful. So to get right to it, obviously we have your carburetor off, and the throttle cable that's going to come in through that port here. It's going to wrap around your butterfly linkage here. It's going to sit in that port there. And again, I showed you a video on how to remove all of this mechanism here, but I wanted to get a little more detail with this. This is your idle adjust here. If you turn this carburetor over, you turn this idle adjust in clockwise, what you're doing is actually opening up that butterfly there. You turn it out counterclockwise, you're going to shut that butterfly. What that's doing is restricting airflow, and there'll be less fuel flowing through your carburetor because of less air flowing through there. So flip this over. If you take compressed air and blow through this port or this port here, it's going to take this diaphragm and your needle there. It's going to push this slide up. It's going to allow more air to flow through there. At the same time, you're giving it more throttle. So that's going to open up that butterfly there on this side. So you're pushing the thumb throttle there. That's opening up that butterfly there. That's sucking more air through these ports here. That's raising that slide along with that needle. Fuel is going to come up from that needle area down at the bottom here. If I had one more hand, I could show you a little more detail. But that's going to allow fuel to be sucked up through the bottom bowl here and into your motor there. You let off the throttle, that butterfly that's in the background there that you probably won't be able to see, let that off. You're gonna restrict airflow a little bit. That slide's gonna come down. That's not gonna allow as much fuel to be pushed up through that main jet here along with that needle area, and then that's gonna slow that motor down. So quick overview of how a carburetor works. Any carburetor this style with air is forced through your venturi there that sucks that diaphragm up is going to have this exact same setup. So I want to give you a quick overrun of that. We've got your fuel coming in from your actually fuel pump on this model. And again, I've showed you a separate video on that, but that's where that fuel comes in, runs along this port here, drops down into your bottom float area there, and I'll show you that. That's the first thing we're going to do is remove 4 Phillips screws here to there, to there. We're going to pull these off. Your bottom bowl is going to come off. Before I do that, you do want to make sure that you've got a hose hooked up here when you're going back together. What this does is if there's fuel ever sloshing around in your carburetor, hits your overflow tube, it's going to dump out this bottom nipple here. If you don't have a hose running here to beneath your motor, that fuel is just going to dump directly onto your crankcase, discoloring your motor, potentially a fire hazard there. So also, what you can do going into winter, if you need to, for some reason, put the wrong fuel in there, you can actually take and drain that fuel using this Allen screw here, loosen it a couple turns, fuel's going to start dumping out that bottom nipple there. Not very often do you do that because typically if your four-wheeler needs a carb clean, that's not a correct way of cleaning it. You don't take compressed air and carbon choke cleaner, drain this, pull this plug here and spray the whole thing off with carbon choke cleaner. That's not a carb clean. I'm going to go through and do a carb clean for you so you know exactly what to do. Get these 4 screws removed there. We're going to set these aside. We're going to pull our bottom bowl off. Sometimes if your carburetor is extremely dirty or it's old and this hasn't been apart before, this O-ring right here will actually stick to your carburetor. Sometimes it takes a little tap like that. That's going to break that seal free. It's going to allow you to pull this bottom bowl off. A lot of times, if your carburetor is dirty, if your four-wheeler's not running right, a lot of times you'll find dirt and debris, sand particles down in this bottom bowl area here, because again, your carburetor is going to be sitting this direction here, so anything that has some weight to it is going to sit in this bottom bowl area here. That's why a lot of people think if you pull this bottom screw here, allow that fuel to drain out, it's going to suck any dirt and debris down. Now that is true. It's going to suck some of the dirt and debris that's in here, unless it's a bigger clod of dirt, say, or a bigger piece of sand. Then it's not going to be, then it's not going to go out that bottom drain bolt there, and they're going to have some issues. The other thing that's going to happen is a lot of times when you have particles down in here, you give your four-wheeler some throttle. That's going to suck that dirt and debris up through these jets here, and they're going to get lodged into your jets there, and you're going to have some issues. So going back together, you want to make sure that that O-ring is in good condition. If you've ordered a Carb kit, link below, they will include this O-ring there. It's a common problem for those to break down and get damaged. Next thing here, we've got our float that's here. Underneath that float is your needle and your needle seat there. So to remove that float and that needle there, go ahead and loosen up this Phillips screw that's on top. You don't actually have to remove this one all the way. You can if you want, but if you pull it that far there, you take a flat screwdriver, take and push that pin out. That'll allow you to lift that needle straight up of there. That is your needle there. That's your seat. So we've got a needle valve and seat there. This is a adjustable float here. So if your float level on this is going to be 0.51 inches, and that's plus or minus 0.02. So if you want to set your float, those are the measurements there. You do want to make sure that you adjust it properly, because by adjusting this too much one way or the other, you're going to allow way too much fuel either to dump in that carburetor or not enough fuel. You're going to starve your four-wheeler for fuel. So those are some of the things to think about before you just go taking this knob and pushing it up or down because you've got a fuel leak. The other thing that's going to happen is this needle valve here is sometimes going to wear out. There's going to be a ring on that rubber tip there, and your fuel will continue to dump on your floor in your shop. It's because that fuel isn't getting shut off, and just adjusting your float isn't going to fix that. You're going to want to replace that needle there. Also, this set, because you have an adjustable valve here, you can replace this seat as well. So I'm going to show you how to remove that. You can pull this needle off of here just like that. Doesn't matter which direction it goes. That pin there is right in the center. You can put it on either direction back onto your float when that time comes. To remove this seat here, you've got a small Phillips screw here. You can loosen that up. You can pull that needle valve out. Now, I want to warn you, this carburetor is in excellent condition. I'm just basically doing this video just to show you how to do this, because we don't need to replace this seat here. By pulling this in and out, there is an O-ring on this seat here that'll seal that housing up, and you don't want fuel coming in here from your fuel pump coming down this port here. You don't want it leaking around this seal because you've damaged this O-ring in here. Pulling that seat in and out just like that could potentially damage that seat. Does have a screen on there. You do want to make sure you clean it. If this carburetor was in need of a deep clean, I would have pulled this seat here, replaced the O-ring, cleaned out that screen there, cleaned out that port there. But that's not the case with this one. You can take carbon choke cleaner, spray it through there or there, blow through it with compressed air to clean that out if you need. But I would suggest, if your carburetor is dirty, pull that, clean that screen off of there. Next, we're going to go to your jets here. You've got your main jet here, secondary main, and your idle jet. This main jet here, take a flat screwdriver, and there's a couple different ways for this to pull off of here. This one here, your main jet holder as well as your main jet, came out together. You've got an O-ring on the bottom here. Inspect that, make sure that's in good condition. What you also want to do is look through here. Hold it up to light, look through there. You should be able to see all the way through there with no issues. If that is plugged or dirty, then your four-wheeler is not going to run right. So make sure you blow through it there with compressed air, carbon choke cleaner. And a lot of times I'll take and remove this jet off of the main jet holder. That way I can clean it a little bit easier. You also want to make sure that these small orifices here are cleaned out so that your fuel will flow through there properly. Setting that aside here, you can actually see the needle here. That would be up here. So I'm not sure you can be able to see it there, but once you give your four-wheeler some throttle, that butterfly is going to open up on the other side. That's going to push this slide open. That's going to push that needle up. That's going to allow more fuel to flow through your main jet here. Now, if you take and put a smaller main jet on there, when your throttle is open like that and your needle's fully extended or most of the way extended, if you put a smaller jet on there, that's going to restrict the amount of fuel that's coming from your bottom bowl area here up through your carburetor into your motor. So if you're needing to restrict fuel because of change of altitude, or if you've done performance parts to the machine, you may want to get a bigger main jet so that more fuel is allowed up through that port there into your motor. So a lot of times aftermarket companies will put those specs on their website or in the instruction manuals, because you do want to make sure that your four-wheeler is jetted properly for your altitude as well as your aftermarket part. This main jet here is a 117.5. So I believe that is stock on this model, 117.5. Now we're going to go to our secondary main, which is this other jet here on top. And this is going to be a little bit smaller orifice than the main jet. You still should be able to hold this up to light, see through it. Make sure you blow through it with compressed air and carbon choke cleaner. Make sure that that's in good condition. Now this jet is a 67.5, so not quite half the orifice size of this one. It is substantially less. So get these confused, hold them up to light. You'll see the difference in the size of hole that's in there. They do look identical. If they were the same size, you could swap them back and forth, but they're not. You don't want to switch those. So bigger one is going to be main jet. Smaller orifice is going to be your secondary, which is here. Now we're going to go to our pilot jet. And this is the most common jet here to get plugged up. So because it is the smallest orifice jet that we have on this four-wheeler. Very, very small. Hard to see through even holding it up to light, but you should be able to see through it. If you can't, you definitely want to clean that out. This idle jet here is exactly what the title of it is. It's your idle jet. So when your four-wheeler is sitting there idling, it's utilizing this idle jet here. So if it is having a hard time getting started or it's not idling properly, you have your idle adjust set where it needs to be. I would go straight to your pilot jet. It is a common issue for these pilot jets or these idle jets to get plugged up. So this is a 15. So it's a very, very small orifice. You see the difference there, 15, 67.5, and 17.5. So difference in orifices there. We're going to go now to our air fuel screw, which is here. Now this is your engine side of the carburetor. You've got a small screw in here. The way that you set this is you count the number of turns in that it goes, and then that is what you set it when you're pulling that carburetor, putting that carburetor back together. So stock, it's supposed to have 2.75, so a little over 2.5 turns out. So what this should do is if we turn this screw in, it should be 2.75. So we'll turn it half, 1.5, 2.5. There we go, and that's where it stops. Now, going back out, same deal. So now, if we need to take this port out, or if we need to take this screw out, clean out that port really good, we can do that. So pull that out, clean it out really good, going back together, screw it completely down until it's seated, and then take and turn that 2 3/4 turns out. So just about 3 turns out. Again, that could be different depending on your altitude and riding conditions and the aftermarket parts. So you want to check that manual or check the website on the aftermarket parts that you have to make sure that that's adjusted properly. But from the factory, they set that at 2.75 turns out. We're going to do that now just so we don't forget. So we got half, 1.5, 2.5, and 1/4. So now we're 2 3/4 turns out. Now to get to the top of the carburetor here, flip this over. You've got a plastic cap here with 2 Phillips screws on either side. Remove these, and what I do is I keep my thumb on top. It is spring loaded, and it's not going to blow apart there. You're not going to lose an eye or anything, but I do like to make sure that I have my finger on top because underneath of this cap is a rubber diaphragm. Now, if you take and pull this cap off too quick or it bounces off of there, you could potentially rip that rubber diaphragm, and they are extremely expensive. So there's the cap off of there. There's your spring. Set those aside. Now what I do is I take my other finger here, push underneath of there, and then this will push that diaphragm, that slide, and that needle all the way up. Now, sometimes what happens is when that diaphragm and that slide and that needle are inside here, sometimes that diaphragm will actually stick right here. You want to be very, very careful when you take that apart because you do not want to rip that diaphragm. So if it's in here like this, if that diaphragm is sticking, and you can tell that when you're pushing up, it's sticking down, what I do is I'll take a small screwdriver, a pick, very, very carefully, and I'll just take and kind of get underneath of it. Again, don't twist your screwdriver, pry it, or do anything drastic like that. But I like to get underneath of it, and then I like to use my finger just to slide it underneath just like that, just to be sure that we're not ripping that when we're pulling that off. So you can take now compressed air, carbon choke cleaner, clean this all out. Typically, you're not going to have bad fuel, dirt, and debris in here. This is completely sealed off. All that goes through here is air. It doesn't have anything to do with fuel or outside air. It's all air that has gone through your carburetor already. But I do like to make sure that that's all cleaned out. Take and wipe this down again. Make sure when you're wiping this down that you do that very carefully. The other thing, I don't like to get carbon choke cleaner on this diaphragm here. Stretches out, causes issues going back together. So if you can keep that dry, take a paper towel, rub this down, you can do that. But I like to make sure I don't get any kind of cleaner on here. I'll show you that when we're going back together, how difficult it is. Take needle nose pliers here. There's a cap right here. You take and pull that cap off of there, and that is sealed with a little O-ring there. You got a spring underneath of there. So I'm going to set that down. What you can do is take and remove your needle here. So take a finger there, push up on that needle. You do want to be very careful. There are small O-rings in here, or small washers in here. So pull that up. We'll set that down, and we do have a washer in the bottom there. So that's our washer there. We've got our needle that's here, and there's a size on this needle, so pay attention, make sure you've got the right one in there. Then you have a plastic keeper here, and this is typically a keeper that's fairly difficult to pull on or off, but it does slide up and down. You can replace that, but that typically will stay there. And then what you have is a clip there, and you can adjust this needle up or down in your carburetor. That your book will most of the time tell you what setting that needs to be at. This one is 1, 2, 3rd setting down, which is where it would come from the factory. So going back together then, now I'm going to take that needle very carefully, put that needle up through that center hole. You can just drop it down, make sure everything's seated properly. Now I take this spring and this cap here, and sometimes you can get this spring to sit on there. If you can't, you want to make sure you take and flip this upside down and put this cap on this way so that that spring will stay on there. It looks like that spring's going to stay on. We'll test it here once we get it on. Okay, take and push that on. It's just going to snap into place, and then you'll be able to take your needle, push on it. It should spring up and down just like that. If it's stiff, you want to make sure you pull that cap off of there and try again because you didn't get something seated properly. And that should hold. You're not going to take, if I were to take and slam this down on the counter, it would push that cap off of there. You need to go flying, but you should be able to push on that needle with no issues there. Going back together then, we've got your carburetor here. This slide will only go in one direction. Take and slide that down. You want to make sure that your needle goes down into your main jet slot there. Put my finger underneath, I take and fold my diaphragm down. Now, if you've gotten carbon choke cleaner on this diaphragm, this part of it's going to be a huge challenge for you. And what I would probably do is leave your diaphragm in a windowsill, make sure that it gets completely dried out. A lot of times that'll shrink down to the size that you need. But what I do is take, and it'll look like that from the side. Keep my finger underneath of there, because if I were to take and push this down, what that does is pull this lip out of the groove that it's supposed to be in. So if you take and keep it held down just like that, use your thumbs there to slide that in the groove. You want to make sure that's completely seated. Keeping your finger underneath there, you've got this port that's going to line up with that port there, and that's all for the airflow. Slide your spring on that groove there, slide that down, and push that into place. Now you'll be able to tell if that that diaphragm is not in its groove there, your cap here will actually take and slide around a little bit. If there's any sliding around at all, then your diaphragm is not in the proper place there. Snug these screws up. That diaphragm will seal it up properly so you don't have to go Hulk mode on these screws. This is a plastic cap. You are dealing with an aluminum carburetor, so just be careful you don't damage anything there. Your choke plunger is here. I've showed you in a separate video how to remove that choke plunger and how to clean that area out. We'll take and now flip that carburetor upside down. First things first, we're going to take our float here. We're going to take our needle. We're going to slide that down into our needle valve. And we can take that pin, slide it all the way back, slide that needle down in there. Make sure that that goes down in there properly. Slide that pin into place. Now we'll take a Phillips screwdriver and snug this up. Again, don't go Hulk mode on it because you will strip that out. So that should slide up and down freely. What you should be able to do is hook an auxiliary tank or your fuel tank up to there. Fuel flowing down in there. If you take and push up on this float there, it should shut that fuel off completely. You should be able to shake it like that. No fuel should be coming out of that needle. If it is, then you obviously don't have this adjusted properly, or your needle and seat are worn out. So inspect that, make sure that's in good condition. Pilot jet, once you've gone through, completely clean these out. You can blow through these ports here as well. Take and put these jets back into place, snug those up. They're brass jets. They should seat fairly snug into place there. You don't have to go crazy and over tighten those. Just makes it extremely difficult for the next time you do the carb clean. Secondary main is there, and pretty obvious which one goes where because this one has the main jet holder as well as the main jet. Again, inspect that O-ring, make sure it's in good condition. Tighten that one up, snug it up. Now we're going to go and put our bottom bowl on here. Same thing, if you've gotten carbon choke cleaner on this rubber O-ring here, it's maybe very, very difficult to get to seat into place there. Set it in the windowsill, let the sun beat down on it for a while and let it dry out. Once you get it into place there, you can set that down directly on top of there. Same thing, you shouldn't be able to move it when you slide it into place because it will, these posts here are supposed to sit in those grooves there, and you shouldn't be able to move it. So set that on. If your O-ring is having a hard time staying in that groove there, obviously don't take that bowl and flip it upside down. You can actually take your carburetor and set it right down onto your bottom bowl. Kind of do it from the other direction there. Our O-ring was stuck into place there and in really good condition, so we didn't have to worry about that. Snug these down. If your O-ring's in good condition, you won't have to snug these up really tight. They should, that O-ring should seal everything up properly. You are completely cleaned and ready to go back together. You've got orifices here that you can clean out. You can do that with carbon choke cleaner. I do suggest doing that before you put the diaphragm on because you don't want that diaphragm to get ripped. When you add carbon choke cleaner or brake cleaner to that diaphragm, makes them very, very thin and very, very easy to rip, and you just want to be careful with that. So make sure you've got your O-ring here going back together. Otherwise, you're going to get dirt and debris in this housing here. It's going to really cause your butterfly there to start sticking. You could have some serious issues there. This is a Mikuni carburetor. Check our video out. We've done a comparison with the OEM carburetors versus the knockoff. Caltrek makes a knockoff carburetor. There's a handful of other cheaper, unbranded knockoff carburetors that I would never suggest anyone buying. Check out our video on that, showing some comparisons. If you've got questions on this machine, make sure and leave those in the comments below. If this video has been helpful, give us a thumbs up. Again, subscribe to our channel so that you will be notified when we post more videos. We've got thousands of videos yet to come, and I appreciate you guys watching.